is Dana Porter, and I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Tonight's Wanna Go Hunting webinar is all about where we can go hunting. This evening, our guests will cover how to find lands open to public hunting and tips on getting access to private land. This Wanna Go Hunting webinar series is designed for those interested in learning about hunting, fishing, and trapping, those who are new or curious. Each episode features guest speakers sharing their experiences getting started with hunting, common challenges faced by those new to the sport. We'll have a brief presentation, panel discussion, and an opportunity for Q&A with the panelists. So with that, I'll turn things over to tonight's host, Bob Knack, the DNR's Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Team Supervisor. Bob?
Great. Thank you, Dana. And welcome, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. We got an exciting topic to talk about. And as Dana had mentioned, this webinar series is all about providing information to people that are thinking about giving hunting a try, but maybe haven't taken that first step. So this is the third webinar in this series, and tonight we're going to be talking about a very important topic: where can we hunt? Last month, we talked about all the great hunting opportunities that we have here in Wisconsin and the variety of species. And tonight we'll be talking about where we can pursue them. And again, we're equally lucky here in Wisconsin to have the great resources, but also a lot of public land hunting opportunities to pursue and enjoy the outdoors with our family and friends. And so looking forward to hearing from our panelists this evening. I'll take the next slide. We'll be joined by the Vilas County wildlife biologist for the DNR, Elena Garretts, and we'll have each of our panel members introduce themselves a little bit later. We'll also be joined by Brock Rosenkrantz with the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. He's on the board of directors. So we're going to have a short presentation, and then we'll get to a few questions with our panelists. Next slide. So the access issue, big topic. Certainly won't have enough time to cover it all tonight. We are planning for this webinar to be about 45 minutes for those of you that are watching. However, we know that access to hunting land is a large barrier for many people. If you're not fortunate enough to own property or have a spot to go, you're resorted to public hunting, and sometimes that can be a challenge as well. And so we've learned through research, social science across the country, really, and access is always in the top three for sure of reasons why people get out of hunting. And so it's a big issue, and we're just going to scratch the surface on it here tonight. And assuming many of you that are watching the webinar are interested in finding a place to hunt, so hopefully we can help you with that as well. Some of the challenges with getting access, and this has happened over time, but smaller parcels equals more work. It used to be with larger parcels, you didn't have to talk to that many landowners to get access to a nice chunk of land, and as land ownership has changed over the years, it makes it even more difficult. Another popular thing that you'll read about in a lot of articles more recently is crowding on public lands, and at times that can be a criticism of or promotion of hunting. Why would we want to recruit more hunters when I already have crowded public hunting lands where I live and hunt? And certainly a fair question. Of course, not all new hunters are hunting on the public land. Certainly people have access to private land either through family or friends, or they put in the work to secure it themselves. I did dig up some data here from Wisconsin on that topic, and we collected data in 2018 and 2019 as part of our Voice of the Customer project, and it was interviewing people on our state wildlife areas, and specifically on crowding questions. They found that 83% of the visitors felt the properties were not crowded. And even among those who thought it was, 73% still were satisfied with their visit. So on a kind of taking a bigger picture look at it, doesn't seem to be that much of an issue here in Wisconsin. It certainly could be different in other states. And it can be certainly different. You were hunting on opening day of gun deer season, or the opening up day of the dove hunting season on some of our public lands. And certainly when our pheasants are being released, they get a lot of attention. So certainly areas where you might disagree with that assessment. And lastly, private land values and leasing. And we've heard, from people that have an average salary, that hunting is just becoming something for the wealthy that can afford to own land or lease land. And again, not always true in all situations, but these are all, certainly challenges that people face when they're thinking about where they're going to go hunting. Next slide. All right, so I'm just you can see the list here. I'm just gonna talk very briefly on each of these, but finding public hunting land here in Wisconsin, these are some free programs, free opportunities to do your homework and find that special place where you wanna hunt. Just like hunting involves work with preparation and practice and studying your species that you're gonna hunt, so does finding land. And so none of this is easy, and it's not intended to be portrayed in that way. And so you're gonna have to roll up your sleeves and do a little homework to find those places to hunt. And actually that's part of the fun. I think I enjoy talking to landowners and strategizing on hunting locations more than I actually do hunting. And so you might find that enjoyable as well. We have the Hunt Wild app here in Wisconsin. And again, all of this is readily available on our DNR webpage. And so you can download the app through the Google Play Store. And there's a button specifically on there, Explore Public Lands. And it's a mapping system that you can look at to find public lands there that might be nearby where you live or hunt. The Public Access Lands Atlas is another online mapping feature that it's an interactive map that, again, you can use that to find public lands in the area nearby where you hunt. You're reminded in those situations to contact landowners before, just to make sure that hunting is allowed on a given property, depending on what program you're finding it under on that atlas. We have the Voluntary Public Access Program. This is a grant-funded program by the USDA, and it provides incentives to private landowners to open their property to year-round wildlife-dependent recreation. So many of those VPA properties, they're posted clearly, like you can see in the picture, and they're open to the public for hunting. So you can search for VPA on the DNR webpage to learn more about that one. Similarly, the Turkey Hunting Access Program is just like the VPA, except it's limited to turkey hunting. And so again, look for that on the webpage. And I know I've enjoyed hunting on a few of those properties myself, and had some success as well. So certainly something there to check out. Managed forest and forest crop law programs, again, very similar. Landowner incentive programs. These MFL program can be either opened or closed. So you'll want to make sure that if you're participating in this one, that you're hunting on open land. And again, you can find that land on the DNR webpage, keyword search MFL open land, and should have a map there of all those properties that are available to you. Wisconsin state parks. Some parks do have open access for hunting. If you are planning to visit a park or live nearby or want to hunt in a park, I would encourage you just to go look at their webpage or contact the park directly to see what hunting options they have available. The next one is F-Flight, or Field and Forest Lands Interactive Game Bird Hunting Tool. This is for the game bird hunters out there. Really neat tool that allows you to look, typically used by woodcock and grouse. And so if you're going to a new spot, I would encourage you to check that out. It also shows the properties that are stocked with pheasants and that have managed fields for dove hunting. So for the bird hunter in mind there for sure. Next one was the Wildlife Damage Abatement and Claims Program. So these are landowners that are experiencing damage from wildlife. There's currently 140,000 acres of private property enrolled in that program, and they provide access for deer, bear, elk, turkey, and geese. And so I would encourage you to look up wildlife damage on the DNR webpage for that as well. And then those are a number of the ones available here in Wisconsin that are, basically free to research. There are a number of apps for purchase, and we'll talk a little bit about those with our panel members a little bit later. Next slide. So getting access to private land, a little bit more of a challenge. And although, wildlife, and depending on what species you're hunting, are not evenly distributed on the landscape. And so within a section of land, if you're thinking of, let's say, deer hunting, one landowner might have really good habitat with a concentration of deer on it, and the next not so much. So it's always a good idea to do some scouting ahead of time and approach those landowners. And just a few tips here. I've done a lot of this over the years, and with mixed success for sure. But a couple of things to think about is planning in advance. Don't go the day before you plan the hunt and ask for permission. Many of the landowners that allow my family and I to hunt, we're talking to them now, usually in August. It's September before they're in the fields, taking the crops off. So think about it in advance and go reach out to them before their busy season. Landowner respect, be a courteous, respectful person. I probably goes without saying. If they say no, thank you for your time and move on. But just being a respectful person, I think, goes a long ways in whether or not you achieve success or not in getting access. Advanced notification. With this, I was thinking about when you're planning to hunt, if you have permission. Very simple nowadays with smartphones to text. Hey, I'll text you when I'm going to be out there. So they know you're going to be out there. You're maintaining communication with them. I know many landowners that I work with that allow us to hunt really appreciate that. And it's easy to do, very, very quick to do. Stay in touch and share results. Stop in outside of the hunting season to say hi, check on how they're doing. If you're successful in harvesting an animal, send them a picture or stop by to show it to them. It really drives home your appreciation for them providing access to you. Offer some help or gifts. Again, you're a visitor on their property, and again, part of that respect is just offering to help where you can. My family, we pulled in to talk to a landowner, and they had a truck bed full of sweet corn, and they were shucking corn, and we stopped and helped them do that for a while. And it's just little things like that, and stop in maybe around the holidays with a gift or two for them. That really does go a long way. Deer will be difficult. My advice is maybe you don't lead with asking for permission to deer hunt. Hopefully you expand your interest in hunting to include other species. And maybe it's squirrels or rabbits or turkeys or whatever, just something other than deer, because people pretty quickly can say no. And once they get to know you a little bit, you've communicated with them and done some of these things, it might be a little bit easier to get access for deer. So deer will be difficult for sure if that's what you lead with. And then keep trying. You're not going to get permission from every landowner. But don't get discouraged with that either, because for the number of doors you knock on, it only takes one, and all of a sudden there's some great opportunities there. So keep trying, stay positive, and keep moving forward with it. So just some quick tips for maybe getting some access to private lands there. Next slide. Yeah, so that's all I really had for at least for an intro presentation here. There's contact information on the screen for myself. I'm happy to answer any questions that people have by email or phone. Also, Emily Eel is our hunting and shooting sports program specialist, and her information is there as well. And she would be equally happy to help you out if you do have questions on any of this stuff. So Okay, I think we'll move on now to our panel members that I introduced a little bit earlier, but I'll call on them again and ask them to introduce themselves and maybe a couple sentences or two about your hunting experience, and then we'll get into some questions. So, Elena, I'm seeing your face. Why don't we start with you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Elena Garretts. I am the wildlife biologist for Vilas County. I have been hunting and fishing pretty much my whole life. I grew up doing it with my dad, my uncle Kevin. Did a lot of archery hunting for deer when I was younger, a lot of turkey hunting, small game. And now in the last few years, I've gotten into a lot more bear hunting and bobcat hunting and things like that. So I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Thanks, Elena. And Brock Rosenkrantz, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm the R3 coordinator for Wisconsin chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, which is recruit, retain, and reactivate. I have been hunting pretty much my whole life too. I got into it because of Learn to Hunt, so it's pretty cool that I get to run those now and help out with a lot of that. I hunt deer, turkey, squirrel, pretty much anything on the ground. So I can don't do much bird hunting, but I do a lot of fishing too, and onyx and all these other apps are just great for finding public land. So I'm super excited to talk about that tonight.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Brock. When we were thinking about panelists, of course, we were looking for people that use technology, use these mapping systems to find hunting locations. And, that's becoming, at least in my mind, for the younger hunters that are really willing to put a lot of work in and go deep into the public lands, it can be very rewarding hunting experience. So thanks for joining us tonight. So I'll just start off with the first question. Elena, maybe we'll start with you. As I mentioned, finding a hunting spot can be overwhelming for a new hunter. They're taking in a lot of different things that they're learning, and now I need to find a place to hunt. What is your best advice to get started?
Sure. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the technology stuff a little later on. So I would definitely rely on doing that internet scouting beforehand. That can help you narrow things down a lot. But a couple more old-timey pieces of advice I have would be to talk to somebody who maybe has hunted that property before. That can provide you a lot of insight. Another good tip is maybe just start scouting in small bursts. If there's a property that's close to home and you can catch it on the way home from work, maybe just scout in like 10 or 20-minute intervals. And my last tip would be if you're looking at a new place, it might be good to start with a generalist species, something like a deer or a squirrel that you'll probably find sign for pretty much anywhere in the state. And that'll start giving you clues to what to look for to find different species.
Yeah, great, Elena. You had mentioned something that triggered for me as well, that, where do I start? And it's, if you live in the country, you could just start around where you live. And I've had great success with that and talking to my neighbors. And it's always helpful to say, I live down the road, or, they know you're local. If you don't live there, maybe you have a family member, a relative, or somebody that does, and it lives in a more of a rural area that you can kind of lean on them to maybe help you find some spots as well. So Brock, did you have anything that you wanted to add to what Elena shared with us?
She did. That was a great answer, I'd have to say, but just getting on line, finding a piece of land, just getting out there and just seeing if you like it or not. Sometimes it's just about if it feels right. If you can see a lot of foot traffic or something already, that's kind of it. Just getting out there. Sometimes finding a buddy to go with if you're kind of nervous about going out. Somebody to go with too. It's just kind of talk about stuff when you're just out there. It doesn't even have to be hunting. So yeah, that always helps.
Yeah. Brock, did you have any examples of that you could share where you use technology or those mapping systems to find a place to hunt that really panned out for you?
Yeah. Public and private, I've been able to use it both. Private land, it's hard to go on and say, this guy's going to give me permission. So you kind of got to go on, look around at different features, pinch points, field edges, stuff like that. Say, hey, this one was going to be a good one to go check out. And you kind of make a list. You go down that list and get 12 people, you might get one. So, or 2 or 3, you never know. But that's happened before where found one, got on that piece of property, got a turkey. So that was pretty cool. Public land too, same thing. Be able to get out. That's where I've actually done a little bit of, most of my duck hunting is on public land. So the little bit that I have, so that's cool to be able to find water. Sometimes you get out there though, and it's dried up. So that's one of the things about boots on the ground. Don't go out there that morning and expect there to be nice swamp to get to. Sometimes it's dry. So yeah, it's great when you get success after doing a little e-scouting. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. I'm starting to use it a little bit more and more, and just one way that it benefited me, I did a little pre-scouting for duck hunting on a wetland on public land, and I marked a waypoint where I wanted to set up for the youth hunt with my daughters, because I know I'd be going out there in the dark and having kids along, and might not find the same spot. So that was really helpful for us. But Elena, do you have any experiences that you'd like to share?
Yeah, the last couple years, I've started turkey hunting a lot more in Zone 7, which is the very northern part of the state, and that's kind of different ball game for me. So using using tools like F-Flight and Onyx especially were super helpful, and the things I focused on were game openings. So maintained and mowed openings for turkeys are really, really beneficial in the north and can be kind of a hot spot. So using those satellite images and being able to find those square openings on the landscape really brought me a lot of success in being able to find turkeys up north. I'm luckier up north, I would say, because I have a lot more public land. There's a lot of county forest, there's a lot of national forest and different land types. So being able to look at that imagery beforehand to help me scout was really, really helpful.
Yeah, it'll save you a lot of time on the ground to take a look at an aerial photo, and and one of the things maybe we can talk about is the different habitat types that you can see from an aerial photo. And if you know what you're looking at, and you spent some time in the woods, you can put yourself there and kind of realize, okay, that's a pine plantation, and without needing to walk there and look around. So there's some real benefits there to being able to identify those habitat types like Elena was mentioning. Brock, is there anything specific that you look for in an aerial photo? I guess it's depending on what species you're hunting, but
Right.
Any examples of how you've kind of used that habitat assessment to find a spot?
Yeah. I guess a lot of it, I like to look at the terrain too. So, I mean, it's habitat and terrain. So, I use Onyx. So I use the hybrid filter where you can see the aerial satellite and it's also showing you the topography of the land. So like I was talking about pinch points, that's a really good one for deer hunting. We'll talk a little bit about deer hunting since that's what main season we're in right now. Pinch points are in just natural formations in the hills where it's kind of come like that, and deer are going to want to funnel through there. They don't want to go up the high point. They want to go in between there. So don't want to really necessarily focus on those though. Get out to a piece of public land, you get out there and you're like, this doesn't necessarily seem right. You could always find something real. There's pinch points that you can find that are real small that you're never going to see on a map. So that's where boots on the ground comes in. Other stuff with easy pinch point type of stuff is if you're looking at a wetland. So like their difference in terrain, deer aren't always going to want to walk through the wetland. If there's a piece of dry land, they're going to hug that next to a river or something like that. So knowing the differences in terrain when you're looking at the aerial photos is pretty important. And there's really good tools to different filters on all these apps that can really help out with identifying what you're looking at too. Coniferous stuff, deciduous, different trees, all that acorn bearing trees, lots of cool filters.
Yep. No, that's great. Thanks, Brock. So we talked a little bit about the technology and some e-scouting there. what are your thoughts on hunting distance from parking lots? And a good use for aerial photos is to see how far you walked. And I know when I was younger in a big public land up north, man, I thought I walked forever, and only to look on the aerial photo and it was about a half mile from where we parked, and it was in a little bit of a U shape. And so it wasn't very far at all. Do you guys, Elena, maybe I'll ask you, especially being a biologist up in northern Wisconsin, any thoughts on for our new hunters here about, you know, the parking areas and distance to get away from those? Any experience with that?
Yeah, I actually did my thesis research on turkeys and turkey hunters and how they interacted with one another. So I was tracking them at the same time to see how they were pushing each other around. And we basically found that turkey hunters stayed very, very, very close to roads and trails, and turkeys seen that and they kind of repelled right away from those roads when the turkey hunter traffic was really high. So just based off that experience, I would say definitely get farther off of the trails and roads if you can. You're going to have a little bit more success with something like a turkey. But if you're hunting something like squirrels or rabbits, it might not matter that you're close to a parking lot. It might be more about the habitat type. So I would say for bigger game, I try to get farther away from the roads if you can.
Yeah, that's really good point, Elena. You know, the habitat, right? You can walk a mile away from the parking lot, but if it's not good habitat for whatever species you're trying to pursue, then your long walk was for nothing. So yeah, just getting away from people alone isn't going to equal success. That's a very good point. Brock, any thoughts or experience? It's kind of southern Wisconsin, and you know, typically more hunters in this part of the state, smaller parcels. Any thoughts on hunting near parking areas?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's a little bit hard to get real far away from some of our parking areas. Some of our really big pieces over here can be like only 300 or 400 acres. And yeah, that's still pretty big. But depending on how it's laid out, you might not be able to get very far from a road or the parking area. So you kind of gotta, it's not about distance, it's about looking at where people don't want to go. And then that's kind of where it gets into boots on the ground too. If there's steep elevation to get somewhere, go up that steep elevation, like go up that hill if you can. If that's because people aren't going to do that. The general public really doesn't, because it's like, well, I got to go up this steep hill at 4:30 in the morning. Well, if you do, you might get a deer out of it. So sometimes that is the key, but you know, people get lucky and go 100 yards from the parking lot, and then that guy that was going way deep in kicked a deer out to you. So that's public land. So
yeah, and I know there's examples of, again, we can talk about deer, thinking about habitat, where, you know, there's thick cover near some of these parking areas, and some of the deer that we've had callers on in the past, where, you know, we know where they are, they'll stay put close to those areas if the habitat is and the cover is there to protect them. So there's some, we won't get into it now, but there's some funny stories to that respect of hunters walking quite close to some nice bucks that they didn't even realize were there because they held so tight. So great. You know, I kind of mentioned in my presentation about some species are more likely to get permission maybe on private land than others. And I'm guessing you don't disagree with the comments on deer. But Elena, any experiences that you've had with success on one species or another that some advice you would give to people?
Yeah, for getting private landowner permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one tip I would have in the southern part of the state, if you want to go hunt a farm, I would offer to hunt something like a coyote or a turkey to start, because those are sort of the gateway species where you can gain trust with that farmer and say, hey, I'm helping out your backyard chickens or your turkey population. And then you can develop that relationship and hopefully go from there.
Yep, that's great, Elena. Good points. Yeah, a lot of these rural landowners, they live with the species that are out there. They know what's out there, and yeah, if there's anyone that's in particular is giving them a little bit of a headache that you can help with, they certainly appreciate that. Brock, anything to add to that? Any advice for one species over another?
Not really, sometimes, yeah, if you try to think a little nuisance species, sometimes maybe coons, I've used the gateway into land by asking to go shed hunting, say, hey, those antlers out in your field are going to pop your tractor tires this spring. I should probably go pick them up for you. So stuff like that is a pretty good one. Yeah, real small things can get in, and just even stopping out and asking if they need help around the farm, something like that. People love talking and just love people that come out to appreciate a piece of land. So
Yeah. Yeah, we do some coon hunting, and we have a hound, and it's been pretty easy to get access to properties to hunt for coon, especially farmers. And if you're willing to wait until after the gun deer season, which I totally understand that as well. So yeah, if you can meet landowners halfway, that opens up great relationships there for the future. And if they say no, especially if you're hunting with a dog, that most of them are pretty well trained, but sometimes they wander. A follow-up question, if they say no, is, well, can I retrieve my dog off your property if it goes over there? And again, I've had them say, yep, no problem, go right ahead. So something to keep in mind. Again, it's just being respectful and anticipating what might happen while you're out there. Some of these apps, when we talked about Onyx, you had mentioned before, Hunt Stand, and there's others. I am by no means an expert on those, but they identify property lines, which are, which are really great. Have you guys used, the property line function there? In some cases, they do provide the landowner's contact information. Brock, any experience or anything to relay how that's benefited you at all?
Yeah, that can really help to see if somebody, if you can really just go knock on their door to see if maybe they live in Florida. You can't just go knock on that house and see if they're there. Another way that's really helpful is with some of these public lands like VPA and MFL. A lot of them are only 40 acres or like 10, 12 acres, which is another topic. But so go and talk to the landowners around those pieces of property beforehand, before you're hunting there, and say, hey, if I shoot something, is it going to be an issue that if it runs onto your land? I'll talk to you if I do, and then get that all cleared out, because I know of some instances where somebody shot a piece or a deer on a very small piece of VPA, and deer runs over onto another property, really nice buck. And these people didn't want to let them go over there and get it, because every weekend it's a new hunter there on this 11, 12 acres of land. So they just, and which is, unfortunately, they're right to not let somebody go on their property and get it. But in this case, they did let the people get the buck off the land. But so going and talking to people, the neighbors around any public property too, can really help clear things up, and sometimes open doors to another piece of hunting property too.
I'll just share real quick, Brock, because you kind of walked me right into it. My wife and I went and tracked down a landowner who did not live on the property next to where we typically hunt, and our concern was that if we shot a deer and it ran over there, could we retrieve it? And that was the question. And it turned into that situation that you just described, where yes, you can retrieve it and go ahead and hunt. And so got some more access there. So yeah, it pays just to, and again, that's that pre-planning. Get there in advance. Don't show up in your camouflage and painted face.
Yep.
Plan it out a little bit.
Don't have antlers on the hood or on the dash of your truck.
Right. Elena, you have anything to share with the property line discussion where you've benefited from that as well?
Yeah, certainly. I hunt with hounds as well. And so if I'm out hunting with my dogs, before I cut them loose, I like to really look at those maps and make sure that there's public land probably within a couple miles in every direction, just to make sure I'm not trespassing and I'm being respectful. So Onyx has been a godsend in that respect for us.
Yep. Same here for sure. Thanks, Elena. I think one more. We'll do one more question here, and it was a good one that we talked about a little bit earlier. With some of these mapping systems, there's different shades for the public land, purple, pink, whatever the shade is for that system. But it depicts different ownership, and so some of it's state owned, some of it's federally owned, county owned, etc. But it is important to pay attention to those shaded colors. And Brock, do you have any experience or thoughts on the importance of that?
Yeah, I can think of one thing real quick with Onyx. There's a layer that's like green diagonal hashes, and it's usually on conservancy properties. Some of them you can just walk right onto, go hunting, fishing. You usually have to check though what's allowed there, because like there's some I can think of that's Mississippi Valley Conservancy that you can just go right onto to hunt and fish. I can think of some though that's Ice Age trail property, and you can't just walk out there to do anything all the time. So you got to check out what's going on with regulations per property, and knowing the layers then, and not just saying, oh, this is public, I can walk out here, because you might walk yourself into a little trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Elena, anything to add to that?
Yeah, Brock made some really good points. Every different type of public land does have different rules. There's some wilderness areas I can think of within the national forest where you can't use any sort of motorized vehicle. I don't think you can even use a cart to drag game out. So there's some really strict rules you have to watch out for. Other things to think of, you can camp on the county forest, you can camp on the national forest, but on state properties, there's designated areas. So there are varying rules by property type. It's a little bit of a steep learning curve, but again, some of these apps and some of these web applications like F-Flight can really help you learn that stuff.
Yeah. Another example where especially bird hunters want to pay attention is where non-toxic shot is required. And I know out west, and even here in Wisconsin, federally owned land is maybe a little different from state owned land. And so, yeah, we just, as hunters, we'd prefer that things are as simple as possible, but it's not always the case. And again, do a little bit of homework ahead of time. I think, does go a long way, instead of kind of waiting until the last minute and learning from those hard experiences. So great. Well, that's really all the questions we have for the panel members. And I know, Katie, I'm not sure if we're getting anybody typing in questions.
We have quite a few good ones.
Good.
Let's go ahead and start with Mike asked, if it isn't posted, are we able to park on the roadside to access public land?
You kind of cut out on me there, but
I heard
Brock,
it.
maybe you can help.
Yeah, as long as you're not, from how I've always played it, as long as you're not obstructing the roadway in any way, having to cross some private property to get into that land. If you're parking right next to the road and it's public right there, you park and just walk up. Like I was taught, I can think of a piece of property that is extremely steep, and that's what you have to do to get onto that piece of property. You park right next to the road. You're on the gravel and you got to go straight up to get there. So yeah, great question.
Elena, anything to add to that? I know you're a public land manager, so you might.
That all sounds good to me. Yep,
okay,
as long as it's
right.
not posted. Yeah.
Okay, great.
All righty. Brock, at one point you were kind of talking a little bit about pinch points. Can you explain what a pinch point is for anyone who doesn't know what those are?
Yeah, I tried to a little bit. It's a natural formation in the hill. You kind of think about hill coming this way and a hill coming this way. A valley is really a pinch point, but that's a really big example of a pinch point. So if you would think of the top of two hills, That's usually really good pinch points, where two hills come together, and then there's like a saddle is what it's called, and it'll actually look like a little dip in the top of a ridge, if that helps at all.
And so are those beneficial to look for because they kind of push the deer through, or why would you care about where those are?
Because deer aren't wanting to go, they're wanting just like us to walk the easiest route. That's why you find deer trails, because the deer trails are usually kind of the easiest route through the woods. And so that just funnels them. It's a physical land funnel for them. And other pinch points, that's just one example of a pinch point. Another pinch point could be just lots of brush on the ground. If you got a ton of brush over here and a ton of brush over here and an opening, they're going to walk through that opening, because they're not just going to go plowing through the brush for no reason. That's another example. There's lots and lots of different types of pinch points out there, but yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Morgan is wondering if you guys have any just kind of general tips for first-time bow hunters. I know it's a little off topic, but I think you guys can all offer just a little bit of something there.
One thing I would offer with this question is when you're setting up your tree stand for the first time, be pretty generous with yourself. If you're setting up on a pinch point or an opening or something where you think a deer is going to come across a trail or wherever you think the deer are going to come from, set up 12, 15 yards away from that. Give yourself that room to make a really good shot. Don't overextend yourself if you're just starting.
I would have to say, if you're going out with the tree stand, and you can either practice out in the woods, setting that up before season, or out in your yard if you've got a tree that you can, just do it over and over and over, because when you get out there, it's going to be kind of a cluster, and you got straps everywhere, stuff like that, and you're trying to not make noise, and you're sweaty sometimes, and so having that down is a really good thing to do, because if you can get up in your tree in 10 minutes, that's great. And then you're just sitting down.
Yep. And always wear your safety harness.
Yes, that is another good one. Safety harness and lineman rope to set up.
Great. Thank you, guys. And for anyone listening who didn't see it in the chat, we are tomorrow night also hosting a Q&A on Facebook, specifically about bow hunting and the other early season hunting or early fall hunting seasons that we have. So if you have specific questions about that, jump over to our Facebook page between 5:30 and 7:30 tomorrow night, and we will have a whole host of experts to help answer those questions. We have two more. Let's see if we can get through them before we hit time here. Cody is wondering about the legality of hunting power lines that pass through public land or VPA land. Are you allowed to hunt right on the power line? And how about setting up blinds or tripods near them?
I actually don't think I can answer that one, because I don't hunt any public land that has power lines going through it. We don't have a whole lot of power lines running through the woods around here like there is up north. So
I believe that is. I would have to double check on it. I'm fairly certain you are allowed to do that. I would have to double check.
Yeah, certainly
Cody,
for the VPA properties. Certainly for the VPA properties, if it's a power line going through it, it's public access. You can hunt it. So, but yeah, I'm kind of with Elena. I would need to check on that.
I would have to almost say, if there's unless there's a sign, and then you're on public ground, unless there's a sign that says property of the power company, something like that.
We'll put the slides back up in a couple minutes here that have our email addresses on them. Cody, why don't you send us an email and we can double check on that one for you and get back to you as well. All right, last question, because we're about at time here. Ross is wondering if the land is enrolled in MFL Open, does he need to contact the owner prior to hunting it?
No, but it's very courteous to, because as another side reason here, there's a lot of times a chunk of their property in MFL. So that might open up some more land, but it's just super courteous too, because if you shoot a deer or whatever, it might run onto the closed part of the property, which is closed and you're not supposed to, or you're not supposed to go on. So that's just a good thing to check in with them and talk to them. And also they'll give you some tips on the property too, probably, and say, hey, this is a great spot to go. There's deer that hang out over here, or turkeys there, or squirrels are always hanging out in the oaks over there getting acorns. So, going and talk to them is a great idea to do, but not required.
Right.
All right, that's it for questions. Bob, I will toss it back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Katie. So we'll wrap it up for this evening. Really would like to thank Elena and Brock for joining us tonight and giving their time to share some thoughts and perspectives that they have as experienced hunters and helping out our novice hunters that are getting started with this great outdoor experience. And I was going to mention with the bow, somebody getting started with bow hunting, I'm excited for you because you're going to be out there this fall and being in the woods during the bow season, and especially during the rut. It's unlike any other outdoor experience other than maybe spring turkey hunting is pretty cool too. But I'm excited for you new hunters that are going to be out there enjoying that for the first time. So thank you to our panel members. Thank you to everybody that was joining us. We will do another webinar again next month. I believe we're going to be talking about where can I practice shooting. So we'll be talking about our public shooting ranges and opportunities to get some practice with your firearm. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dana.
Wonderful, Bob. Thank you so much. This concludes our webinar for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Remember, you can always find your adventure in Wisconsin by visiting dnr.wi.gov.